Hello everybody, it is I, Liney Bliss, and I am doing a special tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how I make pony puppets. And I am basically going to demonstrate how to make your own pony puppet tutorial. What you'll need for this tutorial is specifically Adobe Flash or Adobe Animation. I currently have a much older version, so for those of you who have a much newer version, apologies if it looks a little different, but the tools are relatively the same for what we'll be using. So, if you don't have Adobe Flash or Animation, this tutorial may not be for you. If you have Adobe Illustration, this might work for you, however the tools are different between these two programs. So, apologies if you get a little confused if you're using Adobe Illustrator, but for this tutorial, this is going to be for Adobe Flash. First, we're going to start, this is going to be probably more than one parter of a tutorial, and we're going to start off with the first tutorial being the head. With every pony puppet, it's always wise to start with the head. So first thing you need to do is go up to start up your program and create a new program. Once you click a new program, or a new file, be sure to label it, save it where you want. I'm currently calling it the Pony Puppet Tutorial, which you can see right here. Now that you have your file open, be sure to go up to your modified document. Now you can set the background color to white or to a maroon color. Sometimes I do that just so it will help me to spot what I'm doing, but for now I'm going to use white. I also have the dimensions set pretty high at 1600 by 1600 because the bigger your image, the less pixelated it will be on your screen. And it'll be wise that you make a very large puppet so when you start using the puppet to create vectors with, they'll be less pixelated. So the bigger the puppet, the better. Now that we got that out of the way, we're going to get started with our first many symbols to come in order to rig our own puppet. Now, when I say symbols, I mean we're going to transform our artwork into symbols for rigging in the future. Right now, we're going to start with the base of the skull. I'm going to make sure my line work is black because the base puppet is just going to be a gray-black base puppet. And now I'm going to go into Insert, New Symbol, and I'm going to call it Skull. And be sure it is a graphic symbol, otherwise labeling it as a butter movie clip, it won't work. It needs to be a graphic. So skull, click OK, and now we are in the symbol. See how the scene right here, that is for where our puppet's going to be. We are inside the symbol right now. So now that we're inside the symbol for the skull, I'm just going to call it skull, we can go ahead and make our pony skull. I'm going to go ahead and make the inside of the circle a dark gray and the outline black because this is basically going to be a gray pony. I am also going to set my line work to a 3-level stroke because I just like the 3-level stroke. Personally, you can set it to whatever level you want, but remember that when you do your line work for these symbols and puppets, keep them consistent. That's the trick with these, is keeping the lines consistent. I've had to educate myself this multiple times. Now that we have it, go ahead and make your circle. Hold down Shift, drag the circle symbol, move it into the center if you like, or move it wherever you want. I personally want to shrink this down a little bit so that the line is nice and thick. Let me see. You can zoom in with your zoom in tool, and I'd say that's about right. That's what I want to see. Now, at some point, you may want to go back into the symbol and adjust it depending on what you want your pony to look at. I'm trying to go for show accurate, or as much show accurate as possible. Now that we got that out of the way, I am going to remove part of the line of the circle. Not so much the shading inside, but the line itself. We don't really need this obsessed line because later on there's going to be a neck symbol going underneath the skull. So for now, let's get rid of some of this line. out of the way so it doesn't overlap when we make the symbol for our neck. Now that we have it, let's go back to our scene, make a new layer, and we're going to call it skull. Now you can go into your library and you see the symbol we just made. We labeled it skull. We're going to drag it into our skull layer. Seems pretty small, doesn't it? That's why we're going to increase the size. Whoop. Right about there. That should be good enough. We're going to position it where we think we want the head to be. And there you go. We have our first pony skull. Next up, we are going to attack the eyes. Now, the eyes are very, very important because, well, they distinguish personality. And the eye is consistent of more than one symbol. So, first thing we're going to do is create, insert, new symbol. We're going to call it eye. Or I1. This is going to be I1. It's going to be the eye that's closest to the camera. Now that we have it, we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to turn off the filler, because now we're going to make the base of the eye first. What are you talking about, the base of the eye, Lady Bliss? Well, it's basically the line work around the eye before we start filling in the white, the iris, the pupil, and the shiny parts of the eye. So we're going to call this base in the layer above. Be sure to just double click on it to rename it, or you can right click on it to rename it. And now that we have base labeled out, we are going to create an oval using the same circle or ellipse tool. Without holding shift, drag it down. And if you like the shape of the eye you want, let go. Now we're going to click on this baseline. If I can get it to move over. There we go. We're going to click on it, copy, paste in place. Now don't click out of it yet. The reason why we're doing a double copy of this line is because we're not done making the base of the eye yet. Grab your transformation tool and lower this oval or shrink it down inside. Slightly push it to the, let's say over here, because we're gonna have the brow be facing this way. Now that we have the base of the eye, we're gonna color it in, and it's usually black. The base of every eye in Hasbro's My Little Pony has always been black. Now that the inside is black, we're gonna double click the line work and delete it. Now we have the base of our eye. However, we are not done with it yet, because now we are also going to convert this into a symbol. Convert to symbol by right-clicking on it. Rename it base eye-1. Good. Now we have the base of our eye. We're not done yet though, because this is just the base of the eye. Now we're going to go on to a masking layer, which is very important. That is going to go underneath the base. I'm going to call it masking layer, if you'd like. I just prefer calling it mask, but we're going to call it mask layer. Go ahead and lock down the base symbol layer so we can no longer mess with it. And remember how last time we clicked on right-click the line to copy it? Well, we're going to do that again. Paste in place. See how it's now we have a line work in our masking layer, and it is the same size as our base, which is good. Now we're going to color it in. However, you can color it any color you want. It doesn't matter, because we are going to lower its alpha color down to 0. Why 0? Well, because it is a masking layer. It's not meant to be seen. Layers are going to be going underneath this, such as the iris, the pupil, and the white. So I just clicked in the symbol. I mean, not the symbol. I just clicked in the layer, or the oval. And you can see it is colored, but it's invisible. I can simply delete the line work now. And now I'm going to convert this into a symbol. Convert to symbol. We're going to call it mask eye 1. It's very important that you label your symbols and you don't lose track of what's what. Excuse me. And you'll hate yourself if you don't label these properly, because then you'll get confused of what is what. Okay, now that we have the mask layer and the base layer down, now we're going to move on to the whites first. Once again, right click, paste in place the line work we originally did from the beginning. Now we have our line work. And for the sake of making sure everything stays in, we're going to increase it ever so slightly. And then we're going to color it white. Be sure that your alpha goes back up to 100 so we can see it. So this is the whites of our eye. See, now that I've colored it white, I can delete the line work. Once again, convert this into a symbol. Convert the symbol. Whites. Eye 1. Now we have the white in our eye. Still not done yet, because now we gotta do the iris. Fun, fun, fun! I see what I did here. Not only have I locked the layer, I also hit this little icon, this little box icon. This box icon basically outlines what is in the layer, but takes out the coloring. It helps me to see what I'm doing, which is good, because for this part I'm going to need to see where the white is, and where my base is. I'm going to turn on the base, because now we're going to create the iris. Oh yes, and don't forget to label your layers. So this is whites. This is the iris. Iris will always be above whites. Now we're going to create another oval. Make sure your color is off for now, because we just need the oval. We're going to create the iris. Drag your oval. You can make it as big as you want. Depends on how big you want your iris to be. I'm going to make it about this big. That's a good size. And now we're going to draw the shines of this iris in. The shines are basically 2 different colors of the iris. So I'm going to make one here, kind of drag it into the center of the iris. I'm going to branch it off, kind of make it look like a deformed rectangle, and then drag it down again. Simple lines. It's better that I show and not so much tell, because it's very hard to describe. One more thing. We're going to drag one more line in between this little square we just did. And now we have the 2 shines of our eye. And before we go any further, be sure to save. It is very important to save in any Adobe program. Adobe likes to crash on you, so don't let that happen. So just so we're on the same page, we are on the iris layer. We have not converted this into a symbol. We have simply created the base for our iris. Now for the fun part. What color of your iris do you want your pony's eye to have? Because Lightning Bliss's is more of a cyan, or like a greenish bluish color. Let's go with something unique. How about we go into our liner gradient and we select, how about, you know what, let's do purple. I've not done purple in a while. Okay, so for my dark part of the iris, select purple for the dark part. And then we can select purple again and make sure it's a much lighter version. You can go into that little color circle that I just clicked on and adjust that color up to its lighter form. And I'll go right about there. And now I can use my paint bucket tool to drag up. And there you go. We have the starting basis color of our iris. But we're not done yet, because we got to fill out these 2 spots. So click the purple that you're most happy with, that's near kind of the middle between the 2. And then go into this little color wheel that I originally clicked on. Select a light color than what you were currently on. Say OK. Click on the upper part of the square. Repeat again. Select a much lighter color than that. Click OK, click in. And now you can delete your line work. Now you have the iris of your eye. Let's see how it looks right now. So far so good, right? Yeah, it's looking pretty sharp. Now that we got the iris out of the way, now we gotta tackle the pupil. Oh, but before I do, I almost forgot. Convert to a symbol. Convert to symbol. Iris. I1. Now we have the iris. Very important to transform your artwork into symbols later on, so they'll be easy to adjust. Now that that's out of the way, we can tackle the pupil layer. Create a new layer, relabel it pupil, and we are going to select black for our color and black for our outline, and we're going to create a much smaller oval to represent the pupil. Delete the line. Now it looks more like an eye, doesn't it? Quite so, yes, jolly good, jolly good. Unfortunately, we're not done, because once again, convert to symbol. Pupil. I1. Now, if you want to stop here, if you're satisfied with the way your eye looks, that's totally fine. It's all up to you. But if you want to go another step further, we can start to create the shines of the eyes. For that, create a new layer, call it Shines, and we're going to select white for the fill of our color, and again with the circle tool and our black line, we're going to make 2 shines of the eye. One really big one, not too big though, you kind of want it to be center between the pupil and the iris, and then one more tiny one. Delete the black line work, and now you have the shines of the eye. Remember to select that. You can click on the layer, or you could select the layer itself. Convert to symbol. Label it Shines I1. Now you think we're done, right? Absolutely not. We are not done, because if I were to put this symbol on the skull right now, so for instance, let's make a new layer. We'll call it Eye. Let's say I were to drag the eye symbol we just created out of all these layers and drag it over. Something's wrong. Why is there white shining out of the base of the eye? Well, that's because we have not converted that mask layer into an actual masking layer. So we're going to delete that. We're going to go back into the eye symbol to finish the job. Now this part gets a little tricky for me. So what we're going to do is right click on the masking layer, and we're going to drag down and select Mask. Notice that the shines have already been converted into a different type of symbol. That's because the masking layer is over the shines. We are also going to drag the pupil, the iris, and the white layers right underneath the shines. You can do this by selecting and just dragging them under. See how they've changed? Now, if I were to say unlock the masking layer and this layer, yeah, you can see now. You'll actually see it better when I actually put it on its eye layer. Now that the masking layer has been put on, we can drag the eye to the skull. And now it looks more like a proper eye on top of the skull. And obviously the eye is nowhere near done, because for one, it's too big on the skull, so we're just going to shrink it down a little bit. You can also adjust it the way you want it. You can use the transform tool to tilt it a bit, make it larger, make it smaller. I'm gonna keep it right about here for now until I get a better idea of where our muzzle is going to be. Now that we got the eye down, we probably want to tackle the second eye. this is actually very easy. Since now we have the first eye down, and remember to do file save, we can now go into the eye symbol, select all the layers, copy layers, and now go insert new symbol, and we're going to call it I2. And now we're going to go into the symbol, say paste layers, and now we have an exact replica of all the symbols we just made. And the best part about this is that if I were to adjust the symbols in either one of these eyes, it will affect both the eyes. So if you have an OC that has the same two colored eyes, then you're good to go. But if you have an OC that has two different colored eyes, then you may have to repeat this tutorial when it comes to the eye portion all over again. But for the sake of this tutorial, our pony's going to have the same colored eyes, and that's just going to make it easier for us in the long run. Now that we got I1 done, we're going to label it I1. We're going to make another layer underneath I1 and call it I2. Now we're going to drag I2 into its layer. Obviously it needs to be shrunken down and it needs to be flipped. So what you could do is you could go into Modify, Transform, Flip horizontally, and there you got it. Now we're going to shrink it down. And we are also going to narrow it or make it a little bit skinnier so it goes up a little bit better next alongside the head. Tilt it up a little bit. There we go. Make sure it's properly aligned with the other eye. There we go. And now here's the fun part about having two eyes and with the same symbols and yet in two very different symbols, since you have I1 and I2. I am going to, well, first let me make sure the base and the mask is locked down. And I am going to take the shinies, the pupil and iris layer, and I'm going to go ahead and flip them horizontally, and I'm going to have it pointing that way. Notice this is not affecting your first eye because it's in its own symbol layer. And this is how I make vectors with different eye expressions or have the eyes moving in different directions, by simply going into the eye tool, select the iris, pupil, and the shines, and direct them wherever I want them to go or where I want them to be when I am creating a new vector. Gonna have a lot of fun messing with it, but we're still not done. Not at all, because now we gotta move on to the brow and the eyelids and even the cheeks if you want. So now that we got the first eye down, we're gonna create a folder called I1, and we're gonna create another one called, oops, make sure to double click on it, I2. Drag I1 into the I1 folder, drag I2 into the I2 folder. Now we won't lose track of them. And now that we have I1 in, I'm going to go ahead and lock these layers down so I don't lose track. We're going to create a new layer and we're going to call it brow. Now, brow is going to be a symbol with several frames of different brow expressions. And the more I display what kind of brows we can have, the better you'll understand. So we're going to go into Insert, New Symbol. We're going to call it Brow 1. And now that we created it, I'm going to go ahead and click out of the scene. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag it in, so I know where I am. Now we are in the brow, and as you can see, the reason why I dragged the symbol, even though we didn't do anything to it, I already dragged it into its layer on top of the other layers, so I could see what the brow needs to look like on top of the eye. This is just how I do it. It's not perfect, but it works for me. If y'all find easier ways to do it, then whatever floats your boat. This is how I do it. So for the first brow, it's gonna be, let's go with something simple. How about a wiggly brow? Like the brow you use when you're trying to be sympathetic or even cheeky. You can draw this, you can use a line tool. I am personally gonna draw it with a pencil tool. Probably made that too big. So now we got the base of the brow. And probably gonna adjust it just a wee bit. This again, you can make any kind of brow expressions you want. This is one of the brows I typically use a lot to help me make expressions for sympathy, maybe concern or worry. Now that we have the base of the brow down, we're gonna go ahead and make a filling above it that will cover the eye, because it wouldn't look right if it wasn't covering the eye, right? Okay, now that we have a base, we're gonna color it in. Here's the brow color, which is black, and then the skin color of the pony, which is a dark gray. Remember to keep track of your colors so everything doesn't look too wonky. Oh yes, and also, this is going to be a second frame. The first frame is going to be an invisible color, because sometimes we're going to have ponies that are maybe not making an expression and they're neutral, but you still need to have something in that layer to indicate that. So see that there is something there, but you can't see it, and that's what we want. Okay, now that we got that covered and we made our first brow, for those of you who did not see what I did here, how did I create this frame? There are key symbols you can use, like if you hit F5, that creates a same frame as the previous frame before it, or you can click on the next frame and hit F6, that copies and makes a keyframe. Or you can click on it again and hit F7, which makes an empty keyframe. And that's what we want. So hit F7 to create another keyframe. Now that we got the first symbol, the first brow movement, we're going to create one that is pretty popular in MLP and in any facial expression, and that is an angry brow. Be sure to save. There are two types of angry brows in the MLP universe. One is the curvy angry brow, and then there's the straight angry brow. So we're going to start with the curvy one first. Might want to make sure it's overlapping the eye a bit. Curve it over and then curve it under. Again, you can always go back and readjust it later if you don't like it. That's why it's a art piece symbol that you can go back in and edit at any time. Now that we got the line down, we're going to get the rest of it down. And now that you guys have the idea of how to keep making brows, you can make as many different types as you want. I am going to go ahead and make maybe 2 more, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now that we're satisfied with how many brows we have in our brow symbol, we can actually click out and see the results. So now we have a brow symbol. However, we can't exactly see the results because we need to add more frames into our timeline. So we're going to go ahead and add as many as we can, select all the layers in their frames, and then hit F5. Now we have some legroom to see what the brow looks like. I like where it's at, I like its position, I like where the symbols are currently at, but of course, if I ever feel the need to adjust them again, I have the ability to do so. So now we have the brow down. Now we're going to repeat for our next step, which is the eyelid. Create a new layer in I1, call it lid. And once again, we're going to go into insert new symbol, call lid I1. Gonna go back to the scene, and we're gonna drag eyelid 1 on top, and we're gonna go right into it. We'll make about, well, I'm gonna make 5 frames. Gonna make about, select all, 5 frames to go with. Again, you can make as many eyelids as you want. Most eyelids may have more than 10, more than 15, but for the sake of this tutorial and to give you an idea of how to do it, we're just gonna have 5. So once again, we need to make an invisible art piece in the first layer so that we're showing there is something in fact there. Now that we have something there, we can move on to the second frame. And we are gonna go ahead and make it look more like a sad eyelid. So now that we got our line tool, I'm gonna go ahead and make a sad eyelid here. It kind of looks like a brow, but it's really just part of the eyelid, because eyelids are capable in the ponyverse of doing this, apparently. So this is one typical eyelid style. Not the most known. It's used for closing usually. I'm gonna move on to the next frame. We are going to make sure, I'm gonna use this as a cheat to cover the entire eye by using an oval. Going to adjust it so it looks much like the eye itself. Slightly closer down. Okay, good. Now that we have that, I'm gonna right click, copy, paste in place. I'm going to adjust the line up. And then I'm going to right copy this line, copy. And you can clean up the work too if you don't want to get confused. I'm going to paste in place. I'm going to push it up again. Now you have the eyelid itself closing. We're going to color it in. So this part is black, the rest is skin color. Now we're gonna double click, and now we have a closed eyelid, looking pretty good. Now we're gonna make another one. Probably one of the most popular versions is the one where it's closed or shut tight. For that, I need to make another oval. I'm gonna turn off color for a second. Drag and drop the oval, tilt it a little bit so it's matching up with the eye itself. Okay, and now that we have that, this part gets a little tricky because now we have to draw it in. So this is a closed shut eyelid, and this is my version of it. It's kind of curvy towards the back. Curves up a little bit more as we get closer to the end. Then it points up, down, and then we curve back around again. Okay, and once you're satisfied with it and you delete the lines you do not need. If I can. Haha. There we go. Fill it in, and then remove the lines. See how it looks. I do not like where this line is positioned, so I'm just gonna go ahead and adjust it. Have it point down a little bit. I'm gonna fix the filler here. Refill it back up. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Okay, that looks a little bit better. I think I'll keep it like that for now. And one more we'll make a joyful eyelid. That's a popular eyelid for sure. Again though, there could be more than one style of eyelids. It depends on what you want your pony to have in regards to how many expressions you want to give it. The more the merrier. Once again, make another oval. And then I'm gonna make a line that kind of curves up like a joyful, gleeful eyelid. He's gonna be happy, so happy to have eyelids. I could have used the oval tool for this, but I decided not to. It's up to you. Ha ha ha. Copy. Paste. Adjust. Probably won't be the most glamorous, joyful eyelid in the world, but it'll do its job. Because it's just a tutorial. That looks terrible. I'm gonna try that again. That looks a little bit better. Now we got our first eyelid. Make sure everything's filled up properly. There we go. Click out. And now we can see our eyelid and brow moving in action. Pretty cool, huh? Now at this point, what you need to do is you need to repeat the eyelid and the brow symbols all over again. So feel free to go back and rewatch how I did it and repeat for eye 2. And be sure to keep track on what's happening on this side of the face. And once you get your eyelid and your eyebrow sorted, you can move on to the next stage. In this case, we're going to move on to ears. Make a new layer above the I1 folder and call it ear. Now, most ponies, unlike Lightning Bliss, have very small ears, and depending on how much hair they have, normally we don't see the second ear behind their head. So normally you don't have to make a second ear, but if you want to, that is totally up to you. Now that we have it sorted out, we are going to create a new symbol. Insert new symbol, we're going to call it ear. Now, what I like to do is I just like to take the line tool, adjust it to stroke 3, which is already there, and then just draw out my ear the way I want. Sorry if I get distracted. Apparently there's a fruit fly flying around. So the ear is basically a wonky open oval. By the way, I didn't tell you what kind of pony we're making. I think we're gonna make a stallion pony today. So we're making a stallion pony puppet. Okay, now that we have the base of our ear down, and I think it's too big, I am going to shrink this down. That looks about right. I'm gonna go ahead and create the inside, the dip of the ear, which is basically a colored in deep thicker line. Make sure it's selected black to match the color of the outline. Delete this line, and now we have the inside of the ear. Awesome. Now we're going to cut off this so we can fill it in. So that will be the skin color. Now, for those of you, if you're satisfied with how the ear looks as it is, that's fine. But if you want to go the next step and clean it up and give it a bit of a roundness and pointiness like we have on the inside of the ear, this is what I like to do. Create a new layer above this one. Select the line tool. I'm going to go for a different color so I can see what I'm doing. Lower the stroke down. And then I'm going to zoom in closer. And I'm basically going to cover and round out this line by covering it with color or fill. Call it fill. You'll see why this works when we place it on the head in a second. Repeat the next step. So now it looks a little bit more pointed. You're probably asking me, well, that doesn't look like it's going to do anything. How's that going to look when it's on the skull? Well, we're going to find out. Now that we have the ear sorted out, we're going to go back to scene. We have the ear layer. We're going to go to the ear symbol, drag it into its layer. And we're going to stretch it out a bit. Now we have our pony ear. And it looks about right where I want it. It's not really afflicting with the symbols of the eye and the brow and the eyelid, so that's good. For those of you who want to add some movement to the ear, just like in the eye symbol, you could go into the ear. You could create new frames. Oops. New empty frames, I should say. And what I like to do is I like to copy these frames, move them over, or drag them over to those open frames. And then I call this a bit of a cheat, but if I want the ear to be pointed down, I can just turn it around, upside down, have it point down. And then, of course, remove this, or color it into skin so it doesn't affect the rest of the ear itself. Now you have an ear that can point up, or point down. Up, down, touch the ground, boop. Now comes for probably the most tedious and most challenging part of this part of the tutorial, and that is the muzzle. Lock everything down. Be sure to save. Create a new layer, and depending on what your eyes are doing, you can either put the muzzle in between the eyes or above the eyes. In this case, for now, I'm going to put it under the ear but above the eyes. So new layer, name it mouth. And now we're going to insert a new symbol. Stallion mouth. I'm going to go back to the scene so we can see our head. I'm going to drag stallion mouth to its layer. And we're going to click inside of it. Now we can see what's happening. Mouth. So, mouth symbols and frames. There's a lot of them. There's usually up to 24 or 25 mouth expressions. For the sake of this tutorial, we're only going to do 5. But be sure to do your research on and look up the different mouth expressions that are happening in a 3/4 pose for MLP characters, because you never know what you find in expressions. For now, we're going to do 5 expressions, so create 5 empty frames by hitting F7. There you go. Now that we have it down, I'm going to go ahead and use the line tool again, but I'm going to make it red because I am not going to rely on drawing this. I am going to use the line tool to keep my lines in order, but we're going to have to draw the outline by hand for each individual mouth movement. So the first one we're going to do is a neutral smile expression for a stallion. Stallion muzzles in MLP tend to be sharp and square shaped, unlike mares, who are more curved and oval shaped. Notice that I have the beginning base of the muzzle starting somewhere further away from this eye and closer to this one, but not completely over it, obviously, because that wouldn't look right. So keep it somewhere between the two. Be sure it's curved ever so slightly, and then point down. You can also look at references for muzzles. I do it all the time. I am quite literally going by memory of how I did my muzzles. It's not going to be perfect, but I could probably get it to how I would like it. Now that we have the main part of the muzzle down, I'm going to kind of curl it up a little bit because I like to give it a bit of a chin before I go into the cheek itself. Curve it up, stretch it almost all the way over the skull, but don't go past the skull. There we go. think I'm okay with how it looks for now, but we'll see. Now that I have that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and create the line for the base thick line of the entire mouth. So basically repeat the process but do it inside. Okay, and now that we have that part down, this is a neutral expression or a smile face. So we're just going to create another line to indicate a smile. And be sure to get rid of this line because we're going to fill it in later. Now that we have it down and we make our adjustments how we like it, we could create the nose line, which is basically a little curve. If you want to add another nose, you can just simply do this to give it a little bit more depth. Now that we have it, we need to close this off because we're also going to have to fill it in. But I don't want the mouth to completely cover this area where the eye is, because then we won't see the eyelid or the eyebrow working properly. So be sure it's not overlapping the eye too much. And with that, we're gonna fill it in. The skin is gray and the outline is black. Same for the nose. Now that we have it out of the way, we can remove the line work. And now we have our first mouth expression, everybody. I'm gonna go ahead and adjust it though, because frankly, I am not sure it's big enough on our Pony OC. Again, you can go back in and readjust. Not everybody gets it right the first time. It took me several years before I was satisfied with my puppet making. And, whoop, don't want to remove everything, obviously. But yeah, trial and error. I know it can be frustrating at times. You may not get it right the first dozen times, but if you just keep at it and practice, eventually you'll get it to where you'll like it. I think I like where it is right about now. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next mouth. And for this part, I'm just gonna go ahead and speed through because several mouth expressions take a long period of time and you'll just have to do your research. But we have a happy face, we can have one smiling, we can have one yelling. In this case, I'm just gonna make a few angry ones and a few happy ones. So, to keep consistency, in the future though, if you want to help to keep consistency, turn on onion skin, which is this little box right here. What does it do? Well, it can see layers above you or layers behind you on the timeline. So right now, I'm in the second frame, I should say. And I can see the second frame behind me, which is good, because I need it for the next mouthpiece, so I know what it's doing. And rinse and repeat. Alrighty, now that we have our mouth symbol down, let's see what we got so far. Clearly, we still need to make our own eye, lid, and eyebrow symbols, but again, we already know how to do that for the second eye. You just have to remember to adjust it to fit on the skull properly. Now that we have that out of the way, we'll move on to this last part of the tutorial, which is the neck. So go ahead and lock everything down. The neck is obviously going to go right underneath the skull. So make a new layer, double click, and label it neck. Insert new symbol, neck. Now that we're in our new neck symbol, we're going to go ahead and make the outline black. I'm going to make sure it's on stroke 3. And of course the pony skin itself is going to be gray. However, I don't want to turn on the color just yet because I'm going to start by creating a circle for the neck so we know where the neck's going to be. Now that we have the circle for the base of the neck, we are going to take a line tool and basically curve it down kind of like this. Pretend there's a shoulder here. And again, you can always go back in and adjust it if you don't like where it's at when you put it in its lair. For the front of the neck, put it right in the circle, have it turn inward ever so slightly, and then curve down to where eventually the chest is going to be. Okay, once you like that, be sure to cover it up so you can fill it in. We're going to fill in it with the pony color. Okay, good. Now we have the neck. And of course, if you want to clean up those lines a bit, you can create a new layer like I showed you with the ear and just cover up the base of that one line right there, which I'm going to do right now with my little trick. And voila, the line is curved and pointed down the way I like it. I think the neck is at a good size. So we're going to go ahead and go back into our scene. Click on our library, select the next symbol, drag it into its layer. Obviously it's too small for the head, so we're going to take our transform tool and buff it up a bit. Make sure the line is matching up with the skull line. See, right there, I can already tell the line is a bit too thick. This can happen sometimes, which is fine. You can just go back in and adjust the line thickness in this case. So currently it's set to 3. I'm gonna see if setting it to 1.5 will be enough. Might be too much. Let's set it to 2.5. That looks a lot better. Okay, now we're gonna beef it up just a little bit more. And yeah, I think I like that. I think I like it where it is. However, I am not feeling the skull line very well. And once again, I feel like the neckline is still a little too big, so we're just gonna beef that down to 2. Always be careful with your line strokes. Ah, much better. I don't like where the skull is, so I'm gonna go ahead and unlock it and remove a little bit more of the skull line. Perfect. So that's it for this part of the tutorial. Obviously, I am going to need to adjust a little bit here and there, but this is what we have so far. We have an eyebrow, an eyelid, and a mouth, and an ear, and all in working order. And obviously, his whole body at this rate is not going to fit on the screen, so I'm just going to select all these layers, shrink them down to a proper size, so that we can have more room for later on. So for those of you who are struggling, remember you can always go back and rewatch the tutorial again, watch with what tools I've been using. I've been mainly using line tool, eclipse, oval tool, the pencil tool. This is your line color and this is your filler color. I've been using lots of symbols because that's what a pony puppet is. It is just a clutter rig of symbols that you can use to create vectors with. So this is it for how I make pony puppets part 1. This is the stage where we create the head, mouth, eyebrow, and eyelid. On our next tutorial, I will be tackling creating the chest and the front legs. So till then, guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below and I'll do my best to answer. Take care and keep an eye out for those rainbows. They will make you smile.